Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Live at the Waterhole from Wild Earth and African. A very good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining us. We've started our 2-hour odyssey across the African cameras at Hyena Pan in Botswana with a large group of elephants with some little ones I can see in the back, which is always a delight. But I hope you are all safe and well and ready for all of the wonderful sights and sounds that we're going to bring you over the next couple of hours. My name is Ben Coley. I'll be here to answer any of your questions, share any of your comments and your thoughts on anything that we're watching or anything at all related to wildlife and nature. It is always great to hear from you. Remember, this is live and interactive, so do send in anything that is on your mind, and I will happily share it with the collective. And maybe we can get a good debate going on this lovely Sunday afternoon. It's still very hot and dry up there in Botswana. I'm delighted to report that last night we had fairly overcast conditions, and at one point, a tiny, tiny smattering or a few drops at least of rain, and there is more rain forecast potentially for this evening up out here in the Lowveld. Seasons are definitely changing. Excuse me, and the animals, I'm sure, are going to benefit from that over the coming months. Let's all cross our fingers. It has been a very trying last couple of months for them, very, very dry conditions of late. Whilst it was lovely to have some rain, and there was even some lightning and some thunder in the distance, it didn't trouble us here, but we could see a few distant flashes last night. I did go out on my comet hunt that I reckon that I mentioned yesterday. And I'm delighted to say that even if it was only for approximately 3 minutes, I did manage to glimpse the comet last night through my binoculars in a gap in the clouds just to the right and slightly below Venus in the constellation of Ophiuchus at the moment. But by the time I'd rushed to get my camera set up and tripod, unfortunately the clouds had rolled in completely. So I was going to try again tonight, but as I said, the forecast does not look very conducive to clear skies. But we will quite happily accept some rain, that is for sure. But I'm glad to say at least that I have seen this once in a 80,000 year event. Very, very special. I see we've got some messages pouring in. Ernie T, good afternoon to you. Joanne Mello, good, happy Sunday to all of us and to all of you as well. Penelope Kenyon greeting myself, the crew in Joburg, and all of the fellow watchers from a very cold and rainy northern coast of KZN. Well, that's probably some of the stuff that came past us last night, I would think. Also a bit cold and windy in Cape Town, according to Harriet Hodgkin. And Jill, I'm glad that you're enjoying Hyena Pan in Botswana. This is your favourite camera, and understandable as to why that is. Generally speaking, this time of year, plenty of elephants around. We saw a little tiny one trying to drink yesterday, who was rather cute. And so, just behind this cow in the centre of shot, I'm pretty sure I saw some very little ones there, but you can see the way they're all sheltering in the shade, taking a bit of a rest up against what I assume are mapani trees. But Lady Kenyon, you also said you had rain last night, so you also didn't see the comet. No, no. Well, I say I did, but very, very, very brief for me to set up the telescope and the astro cameras and everything, but I have to say I didn't deem it worthwhile last night. But I'm just very glad to say that I at least saw it through binoculars. Unfortunately, it's getting further and further away, so it is dimming. But I'm sure I'll try again at some point in the next few days if the weather allows. So many of these elephants just having a rest up against tree trunks. Definitely doesn't look as if anybody's in a rush to do anything today. Very dry and desolate landscape. Avid spotter. I'm glad you've also seen the comment from Nordic in Cape Town. Yep, very lucky, but it has been one of the brightest comets we've seen for quite some time, created quite the stir, and for once justifiably so. I was very disappointed to have missed it up until now, but I've seen many, many beautiful photos that people have taken over the last couple of weeks from both hemispheres as it's ducked in and out from behind the sun and been visible at different times. So, any of you who may have seen it from South Africa about 2 or 3 weeks ago would have been early morning, but now is visible after sunset. It was actually higher in the sky than I was expecting it to be last night, and just very grateful for a momentary gap in the clouds. I thought we'd have to zip all the way down to Tembe Elephant Park in Maputo land, where we have our standard offering of Ellie's here, living up to its name. So officially, I was a little bit late to read out your comment of a nice herd of elephants in Hyena Pan, but I'm sure your comment is just as relevant now, all the way down here in Maputo land, eastern side of South Africa, just south of Mozambique. Can't see the sky, but it does look rather overcast and grey there in comparison to the normal sights that we see. Yep, there we go. But it seems come rain or shine or overcastness, these ellies just love hanging out by this dam at Tembe. Denny, interesting question. Do I think that or not elephants, do animals in general respond to things like comets and shooting stars? No, I wouldn't have thought so. They are just visual phenomenon. They don't seem to have any direct effect on the Earth. Certainly, larger things or solar storms. We had a discussion last week about that. That potentially it can mess with animals' abilities to navigate and migrate due to the disruptions in the Earth's magnetic field caused from solar storms and things. But comets and shooting stars are very much just atmospheric phenomenon. They're relatively small. So, I mean, perhaps they might catch a glimpse of something bright out the corner of their eye that might attract an animal's attention. But I think that's about all that it would be. If in a rather extreme circumstance, a massive Armageddon type asteroid was hurtling towards Earth, I would think that the animals might be able to sense that if there was a pressure change with something so big, possibly compressing the atmosphere. But I mean, that's a ridiculously extreme case. But no, otherwise, I do not think so. No, nothing that I've ever read, or nor could I see any reason why a shooting star or a comet would have such an effect. there are, of course, lots of cultural beliefs about that sort of thing. None that I'm aware of involving elephants, but the Hammerkop is very much considered a bad omen in Bushman culture. And one of the stories behind that is that they believed that shooting stars signified the impending death of an important person, a village elder, or certainly somebody of standing in a particular village, and wherever the shooting star was headed towards would give an indication of where this unfortunate event was going to happen. And so they say that the Hammerkop used to stand peering into the water, hoping to see a reflection of the shooting star. And when the Hammerkop saw that reflection, he would then fly over the house of the person in that village who would potentially soon to be afflicted. So one of the reasons why Hammerkops are considered an ill omen does have to do with shooting stars, but not a direct link in terms of behavior. Comets often seen as a bad omen. They've often been seen in the sky and associated with bad events. I think the overthrowing of the Mayan culture was preceded by a comet. When Nandi, Shaka's mother, passed away, there was a comet in the sky. Same in for the Great Fire of London and for the bubonic plague. So over the years, comets have always been seen in a rather negative light as a foreteller of doom, or portent, or bad omen. So shooting stars, of course, in Western culture, very much associated with the positive thing and making a wish. We all know from the very famous song, of course, but that idea of making a wish actually stems all the way back to Greek mythology, as does so much of our world, unbeknown to many of us. Stems back from Mount Olympus being somewhere above the sky where the gods were hanging out. And every so often, so it is said, that one of the gods would get curious to see what the humans were up to, and they would look over the edge of Mount Olympus, and as they were peering down, they would inadvertently dislodge a star from the heavens, which would then fall down to earth. And so it was thought that you should make a wish because at that precise moment, one of the gods was actually looking down on you, and thus there was a far greater chance that your prayer or your wish would be answered. If you're enjoying the wagging tails of the elephant, absolutely. Not so much a communication thing. I think it's probably more to do with dealing with flies. The tails of elephants certainly used in communication to convey stress and aggression and body language. So an angry elephant or a stressed elephant will often erect its tail, so it's sticking out from the body, which will be a cue that we've certainly learnt to key off, and I'm sure other individuals do as well. And greetings to you, Jive Bunny, as well, from a very wet Somerset. I'm sorry to hear that, but this time of year out in the UK, I am not surprised to hear it. It sounds like it's Juma. Let's have a look. That's not a baboon. I think we're going to have to educate those in Johannesburg of the difference between. Oh, there are the baboons. Okay, you are forgiven, lovely people in Joburg. Baboons look like they're just chilling down there by the water's edge. Of course, you often see them this time of year pulling out lilies and other aquatic vegetation and feeding on the roots. We've witnessed that a few times, but not much there in the dam at the moment. And actually, nor do I even see our floundering catfish. I don't know if they've just given up and decided to bury themselves, or if they've all been taken out by storks and fish eagles and other piscivorous birds. But lovely to see the baboons coming down, having a drink from that rather fetid water, I would think, but better than no water. Good afternoon, Canine Girl. I'm glad that you could also join us, and a very happy but soggy Sunday for you. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm sure we will make up for it over the next couple of hours with some beautiful, beautiful views from different cameras. And so, always nice to see baboons. There's something very, I can't say comforting, but somehow we can relate to baboons for obvious reasons so well. Always nice to watch them go about their antics. That one at the back. Oh, I thought he was hobbling for a little bit, but looks better now. I wonder if baboons catch fish. Never thought about that before, but in an area like this where there were potential, certainly were a couple of days ago, so many catfish struggling in the receding waterline, whether baboons have ever been recorded catching fish. If any of you have seen such a thing, do let me know. It's never something that I have witnessed or heard about, but I see no reason why not, being omnivorous animals. It does suggest online that they do eat fish, but I believe we've just been reliably informed by Lenny that we haven't seen any catfish movement for 3 days now. So I can't imagine they would have all succumbed to predators by that point, but I think maybe they've just decided that life is not getting any easier, and maybe it's time just to check out for a while and wait for better conditions. They will bury themselves in the mud and pretty much just slow all of their metabolism right down and await better conditions. Very clever to be able to do so. Great way of dealing with problems. Rather like the very classic tardigrades, if you guys have heard of those. Those little water bears, amazing little um, organisms extreme temperatures by just drying themselves out and just shutting down until such time things are better. These two baboons look as if they've had an argument. Yes, that water has dried up considerably. I also don't think I've ever seen so little water in this dam. So hopefully these current conditions are going to bring around something. But amazing to see baboons, they always seem to find something to eat. We can see that one on the right who's got his back turned to the other one. It did look as if, say, they've baboon reaching around in all the fallen mafani leaves, and they were finding all sorts of stuff to eat there. I was just straining with binoculars to try and see what they were getting. I wasn't sure whether it was seeds or little arthropods that were under there, but they were having a field day. It sounds like we might have a couple of elephants having a drink at, I think it was Rosie's Pan, so let's try over there. And there they are, a couple of youngsters. I see Darcy Miller, you're also commenting that baboon behaviours are very interesting to watch. I couldn't agree with you more. There's something very relaxing and amusing about watching baboons go around their daily antics. Joanne Mello, you like their facial expressions. But yeah, again, I think it's because we can relate to them so well, and we've got a better idea of what emotions are going through their heads by watching those facial expressions. Oh, just enough space to squeeze past. And Rosie Adams, you said you saw a wildlife film where they've learnt to wash their food and rock pools for a salty, cleaner feast. Well, I think that's a brilliant idea. If you haven't got access to salt, then why not make use of natural salt? I know we shouldn't have too much salt, but I am one of those people who generally add salt without even tasting, as terrible as that may sound, much to the annoyance of chefs, certainly. But things without salt are just very bland. There's a reason that sodic sites have very little stuff growing on them as well. Yes, it's difficult for vegetation to grow on sodic sites. If you don't know what a sodic site is, it's that sort of clear, very compacted open land, usually on the flat area before you get to a drainage line or a dry riverbed. So water tends to leach out of the surrounding slopes, runoff sort of runs across that flatter area, and then the water becomes stationary and soaks in. And particularly in this area, we have a lot of sodium in the granite here, which when it erodes away is released into the water. And that salt goes into the soil and actually almost forms like a crust over the soil, which makes it very difficult, A, for seeds to embed into the soil, and B, for when if they do, and then they try and germinate, there's that sort of crusty layer that the young plant has to break through, which is also a little bit difficult. But when anything does grow there, it usually gets eaten incredibly quickly because animals do require salt. That's why we put salt licks out in times of nutritional stress. So often associate impalas with sodic sites, and if there is a little green flush there, you can almost guarantee some impalas because they've got those split lips, which enable them to get right down to the ground and eat those very, very fresh, short, young shoots coming out, which are high in mineral content. So it's another one that sort of all combines to keep those sodic sites very open and not much growing there, except magic quarries. They're what we call halophytes. So they are trees that very much enjoy salty soils. Then you're pointing out Cedric mentioned that there was some rain forecast for tomorrow and Tuesday. So yes, let's hope that dam recovers. So my forecast also says possibility of rain tonight as well. So let's cross our fingers. Riley, can animals get cleft lips? Well, I certainly know that they can in dogs. Um, I don't know about other animals, but I don't see why not, because it's a, oh, I don't know how you'd even describe it, but it's a physiological um, problem. It'll be genetic, possibly environmental. Maybe if an animal has a scar or a cut on the lip, it could grow back funny. But an official cleft lip, certainly in dogs, but I don't know about other animals. Rosie Adams pointing out that desert ellies walk for miles to go into caves where they can get some salt from the minerals that are precipitated in there, and goats that climb very high on dams for salt as well. So yeah, animals need salt. It's a pretty important, I was going to say food stuff, but that's probably not the right word, but it's an important mineral that we all need. So yeah, animals know how to find them. They can't go to the shop and buy fancy Himalayan pink salts and things. They've got to find it where they can. And then, of course, those animals in salty environments living in seawater have to deal with excess salt. But they've got salt glands which can filter out that salt. So, as always with nature, a good balance required. Too much, too little, problems. The perfect amount. The Goldilocks amount is exactly what they're looking for, and various adaptations and behaviors that have been, never know what the right word is, designed, evolved, learnt in order to keep that balance in check. A little flap of annoyance there. I wonder if that was because this individual's been summoned that it's time to move on. It's rather plump, this bull, though. It's quite rounded. Pretty sure it is a youngish male. Slightly annoyed about having to leave his little oasis. Carol, it seems our Ellie is vacating the area, so let's head over to King's Camp. Oh, wow. Beautiful grey heron posing in front of the camera. Looking very regal. Zola, we sort of crossed this bridge yesterday with what happens if the dams run dry, do we intervene? Again, it very much depends on reserve policies, so it's hard to give you a finite example. Looks like this heron stalking something. But generally speaking, obviously, if a dam runs dry, an animal will move to an area where it can find water, even if that means a long walk. But if we have restricted them by erecting fences, then I personally believe that it is our responsibility to intervene where we can. Although supplementary feeding is a lot easier than supplementary watering, certainly. But yes, we should do, and most reserves, to my knowledge, will do what they can because If they don't have any animals, they're not going to have any tourists. The ecosystem is going to fall apart. But out in the wild, in much larger areas, yes, animals are forced to either migrate to pastures greener or moister. Um, but they do also perish. It is unfortunately a fact of life. The water dries up, animals struggle, and there are always periodic die-offs in short-term and long-term cycles as well. But left to its own devices, if we stop messing around with our atmosphere, nature will find balance. There will be drier periods, there'll be wetter periods, droughts, floods, diseases. These are all things that sort of regulate population numbers. Obviously, the danger is with the damage that we are imparting to our environment and global warming and pollution and everything else. Nature is very, very adept at adapting, but we are changing things at such a fast rate that nature is struggling to keep up. That is the big danger. And yes, I think we do need to, where we can, provide water points certainly for animals. Well, there's a terrapin who's decided he's had too much water. He's going to come and warm up in the sunshine. I think we're going to quickly head over to Founders down in the Eastern Cape. They have a beautiful view of two very, very special animals. The Mantis Founders Lodge. Thank you, African, for this one. And always very special to see a couple of white rhinos or square-lipped rhinoceroses. And they're probably good go. Looks like a bull with a younger individual. Oh, short but sweet. We had a lovely sighting here a week or two ago with, was it 7 rhinos we had all lying around under that tree? Dramatic skyline behind. Okay, well, that was a quick visual. Let's head back to King's Camp and see if that heron is still on the hunt. Oh, he is, and he's got something. What have you got? I've got a frog. A platana or something along those lines. I can see some flailing legs. You can see the heron dipping it in the water, trying to get rid of that mucus that will be on the frog. I imagine a platana, but difficult to tell. Looks like a platana. Seems strange to call a platana a very aquatic frog, but they do spend pretty much all their time in the water. They're well known for having, say, a very sort of mucousy secretion, which they use as a defense mechanism. Obviously, wasn't very effective in this case, but the heron doing his due diligence to try and clean the worst of it off. You can see those big webbed feet. Oh, dropped it. It's a bit strange. He dropped it and backing away as if he's worried about something. Perhaps decided he didn't like the taste of that platana after all. So maybe that rather unpleasant tasting mucousy secretion did its job. Cleaning his mouth. Maybe he's playing a game of cat and mouse and just put it back. He's going to go and catch it again. Certainly looks poised to strike. Hudson, you're right. Very cool to see. Was that interesting behaviour? Why do I let it go? I can only assume that he got tired with those secretions and the taste. Obviously, didn't fancy frogs today. I feel like these two are having a conversation. Do you mind if I stand here? Oh, looks like they're having a little kiss. It's sharing a bit of information. It's terrible. I seen any good fish around? No. Well, I didn't recommend the frog. Hmm. Well, there's a sight you don't see every day. Perfect camera angle. I think it was that taste which has upset the heron. Ever since it dropped that frog, you can see it sort of gulping or manipulating the throat there. I think it probably just had too much stuff in there that it didn't like. Lovely markings on the neck, though. Look at that. Oh, oh. I don't know if you got something small there, or if it was a failed attempt. Oh, he's got another frog. Looks like another platana, but I'm not 100% sure. It's difficult to say. I was actually looking at frogs the other day because we're starting to hear them now in the evening. We're getting that amphibious chorus after sunset. Just reminding myself of some of the more common frog calls we get in this area. And looking forward to doing some frogging as the months roll by. Don't stand behind that tree now. Interesting to see if he finishes this one off or if he decides to get rid of it again. I just glanced away at the wrong minute then. I'm assuming that the heron swallowed the frog. as opposed to releasing it again. I wonder why that one was consumed and the other one was released. That lovely tassel blowing in the wind on the back of his head. Say his, could be a her. There's no dimorphism in grey herons. Excuse me, I was about to speak then and had a coughing fit. I was just about to say that how nice that was to see the heron actually with a successful hunt and finishing his frog. A lovely little pair of blacksmith's lapwings on the far side, and I'm not sure if that was another heron or the same heron who's just swapped sides. I think it's the same heron, just decided maybe it wanted a bit more shade. But that was very cool to see. But I think let's head back over to Tembe and catch up with our elephant to see what they're up to. Always love these views here at Tenby. I particularly like this, what I believe to be a weeping Bourbean tree in the centre, or just on the near shore. A nice little bit of green. So it always seems to be elephants here. It'd be a great place to just come and hang out, have a sandwich, cup of tea, and just watch the world go by. These clouds of dust from our dust bathing elephants. Elephants in the mist. You sure we've seen this floppy-eared elephant before? Makes you wonder whether this one's body temperature is slightly higher than the rest, or how much of an issue that floppy ear is in terms of thermoregulation on a warm day and flapping of the ears to cool the blood. And one of the reasons it works so well is because the back of the ear is normally in perpetual shadow, but this one being folded over like that, I wonder if how much of an effect it is for that blood to be warmed up in direct sunlight. Simon, you're asking what the birds are going to do if there aren't any more frogs, and you've mentioned that disease, which I'll probably mispronounce, but you have at least spelt it out for me, the chytridiomycosis, which is that fungi that seems to infect frogs and has having a devastating effect on them. Um, what the birds will do, well, they'll have to change their diet. Thankfully, there are no birds which are exclusive frogivores, which is a word that I've just made up. So if there were no frogs, they would just unfortunately not be eating any frogs, and they would have to supplement their diet elsewhere. But I agree with you, it would be a bit of a problem for those birds that do rely on frogs, but I'm sure they would just have to adapt. I haven't heard too much about that disease for a while. I know it was particularly bad a while back, and it certainly hasn't been eradicated, but it is a big problem for frog and amphibian species, many of which are pretty endangered anyway due to habitat loss and their propensity to be affected by pollution. Of course, they do tend to absorb atmospheric pollution and pollution in the water through their skin, which is sort of semi-permeable. So that's also another problem, and so something we look out for. Lots of frogs means that you've got a good, stable ecosystem, a good, healthy ecosystem. They're an indicator species of that, frogs and toads in general. Simon, you're also asking whether rhinos have what you're calling a DNA cousin, which is a nice description of it. So, like humans and chimps and elephants and dugongs. Um, Not that I'm aware of, Simon, to be honest. There's nothing much like a rhino. Their closest relatives from a taxonomical standpoint are things like horses and those things which are known as even-toed ungulates. So animals that just have one or three toes or toenails, as opposed to the even-toed ungulates like cloven-hoofed antelopes. Hippos have four toes. Most things have four toes, even numbers of toes, so ones and threes far less common. I don't know anything else that has three toes. But tapirs, horses, um, zebras obviously would sort of be the closest taxonomical relative. But yeah, I don't know of anything else from a DNA standpoint that's still living today. Again, Faustino, you're enjoying seeing the impalas with the elephants. Yes, it's always nice to see various species together. Rather intrigued, but these woolly neck storks seem to be just doing some exercise and doing some laps of the track there, moving right the way around. I would sense it's probably a male pursuing a female who is none too interested and just trying to keep him at bay. But it is always nice to see when you have interactions or at least various species together. It makes the ecosystem feel more complete and more whole. And in terms of the social structure, Kim Faustino, there will be nothing sort of obvious at the moment because remember, all of these impalas are pregnant now. About 98% of all impalas fall pregnant. They'll be giving birth to their lambs probably beginning next month and peaking in December, but all very, very close together. So you're going to get mixed herds at this point. You're going to get males and females intermingling with one another quite happily. Males will have formed bachelor groups as well, but with very little sort of infighting because there's nothing to fight for at the moment. So there's no rigid structure this time of year. We'll only see the more obvious structures occurring once we get to sort of March, April time when the rut begins again. The males will all start competing with each other. The dominant males will hold their territories. The non-dominant males will form their bachelor groups, and the breeding herds will roam in between those territories, and the dominant males will do what they can to mate with the females that enter their territories. So this time of year, it's quite normal to see mixed herds, so because everybody's friends pretty much at the moment. What have we got there? Something hiding in the shade there, or just some nice greenery for a change, as opposed to dusty landscapes? But that's the difference of the climate. And the eastern side of the country, next to the Indian Ocean, a little bit more moisture there, more of a tropical environment. It's nice to see some greenery again. Having been in the park last week in Kruger, I went in at Palabora Gate, which is very dominated by sort of Mapani felt up in that area, and there's no leaves on the Mapani, so you could see deep into the bushes at the moment. But in summer, it'll be very, very different. Very, very thick, very, very dense up there when all the leaves return. I think let's head back over to King's Camp and see if our heron's still around or if anything else has come down to the water. Oh, it certainly has. Hello, Warty. Looks like a lovely warthog sow having a little bit of a bath. Lovely profile shots there. You can see it's a female for obvious reasons. You can see the teats on the underside of the belly there, and note the much smaller warts under the eyes than the males. And she's also lacking the second set of warts closer down towards the mouth, towards the nose. It's very difficult to age, but a good set of tusks on her nonetheless. Oh, disturbed by something, but she did look a little nervous. Also very likely pregnant at the moment, primed to be giving birth probably in December sometime. Something bothered her off to the left. I get the sense this heron is patrolling its grounds here. Just waiting to see whether anything was appearing off on the left, because something bothered the warthog. But it seems not. I think let's go back over to Rosie's pan. Sounds like we've got some more illies having a drink there. Kim, you're most welcome for me answering your question. If you saw the ones with horns, then back to the impalas, sorry, that were at Tembe. Yes, they would have been males. I didn't take particular notice of all of the individuals. I saw a couple of females there, but if you did see some with horns, then yeah, absolutely, those were males. Generally, you find with a lot of antelope species, it's only the males that have horns and females not so. But of course, there are species where both sexes exhibit horns, like wildebeest, buffalo, and eland. But generally, those are species that prefer open grasslands where the female has a need to protect herself. She can't rely on hiding in the thicker vegetation. Impalas often associated with woodland fringes, things like inyalas and kudus, bushbuck prefer more heavily vegetated areas, being browsers, and where horns would just get in the way. So the females in those species generally rely on being unseen. But if your habitat is a big open field, then it's only fair that you have a means to defend yourself and your youngsters. The elephant on the right's got panda eyes. This youngster seems intent on having a bit of a push and a shove, but no one wants to play with him. Like, dude, I'm just having a drink. Leave me alone. Enough. Leave me alone. So come on, play, play. I shall prod you in the bottom. This one at the back's finally got the message. This one can have a drink in peace. But Jill, you're right. Elephants never get old. Well, viewing elephants never gets old. Always so entertaining to watch. And Rosie Adams, you're enjoying the lovely, affectionate elephants. Well, maybe this other one just needed a little bit of a drink before engaging. Well, Jackie 74, you said that the Ellies must have a mud throwing play. We saw a little bit of mud throwing there at least, but I was kind of hoping one was going to get annoyed with the other one and actually throw mud at each other. That would have been funnier. But again, some lovely interactions between these two young bulls. Mandy, when you're asking about female tuskers, I assume you mean females with particularly large tusks. I've seen some females with good sized tusks, but nothing like you would expect to see on a really big old elephant bull. It's just a genetic thing, really. Female tusks are generally smaller and thinner. Um, Remember, tusks are basically an adaptation for dominance and for fighting, so important that they are very strong and well built. So females have never really required big tusks, so they've never developed the large tusks that the males have. So, as I said, you will see some with good sized tusks, but nothing like what we would consider a big tusker. Although you've got me intrigued now, I'm going to have a quick search online for what the longest female tusked elephants or the longest elephant cow tusks have been. Yeah, good look online. Just gives you all the big tuskers, the males. Nothing obvious that's coming up. But I've no doubt there have been some cows with longer than average tusks. But well, I've seen occasionally some that make me go, sure, that's quite impressive, but never to the same extent as the bulls. Yeah, well, these earlies have moved off. Let's head back over to what's left of Juma Dam and have a look there. Ah, lovely female Inyala. That golden orange colour and the white stripes. Julia, you were asking why do elephants have toenails? Well, good question. They're not sort of attached like ours are. I always sort of describe them as floating toenails. And to be quite frank, I think all they really do is protect the toe while it's dragging through the bushes there. So it's more of a shield than anything else. And there are differences between an African and an Asian elephant's toenails. So Asian elephants have four toenails on the back and 5 toenails on the front foot, while Africans have 3 on their back foot and 4 on their front foot. Why that is, that I couldn't tell you, I'm afraid. But there are slight differences within or between the two species and their toenails. So it's something to do with their strange foot structure. So they're near ungulate elephants, so it looks as if they walk on the soles of their feet, but they don't. They are kind of walking on their tiptoes, as is this Inyala. But Inyala's toenails have become adapted, or have evolved into what we would consider a hoof now. Obviously, elephants would look rather funny on hooves with sort of platform shoes, although I've now got that image in my head and think that we should start looking for platform shoed elephants. So no point having nails on the underside. So I guess they've sort of migrated up to the front, as I say, where they just act as a bit of a bit of protection. The elephants don't lift their feet up very high when they walk, as a rule. So just against knocking on rocks and stumps, I'm guessing. And there's a kudu. Nice to see one of the ghosts of the bush. So you can see preferring that thicker habitat. Okay, well, it all seems quiet on the Juma front, so I think we're going to head over to, I think it's Nkoro, where we're going to go and have a look at our everlasting hippo. Here he is, a real stalwart of Nkoro Bush Lodge's waterhole. Always seems to be present, but I suppose doesn't have far to go. Should have plenty of grass in the surrounding area, particularly when summer comes. But I'd love to age this old boy. The life expectancy for a hippo in the wild, maybe 40 to 45 years. And just looking at the condition of this one's skin and the amount of scarring and things I've seen on his back, I think he's reached his twilight years. Let's leave it at that. Looks like an Egyptian goose having a bit of a groom on the right-hand side as well. For this hippo, I hope he can attract some females to his pond at some point. But I sense he may have just got a little bit too long in the tooth, was probably ousted from his previous pod. wherever that may have been, and has taken up residence here and is quite happy here now. But he does look very content, at least. Jill, he does look tired. I agree, but say he's probably had a long and fairly. Oh, there we go. There's the movement. Imagine he's seen a lot of things in his life. He's enjoying the fruits of it now. So he was particularly tolerant the other day when all those elephants were wandering around in his dam. I kind of expected him to react a little bit. Maybe he didn't. He seemed to be quite happy and comfortable there, but I imagine he's seen it all before. Oh, nice to check in on this old boy. But let's head back over to Rosie's pan. Sounds like we might have an elephant having a bath. Give himself a good covering of mud there. Oh, now he's off. Everybody's coming and going today. Sometimes these elephants hang around for hours. Everybody today seems to just be wandering in, having a quick spa treatment, and then disappearing again. Not even hanging around for a dust bathe. Okay, well, it sounds as if, despite all our chats of rain, it sounds as if the heavens have opened down at Tembe. So let's go have a look at some impalas. Something we don't see every day. Sweet, look at them all sheltering from the rain. They must be so happy, but must be a shock to the system. But how nice is that to see some rain? Even after the little bit of rain we had here in the Lowfell, so I fully expect that in about a week or so we're going to see some benefits of that or the upshot of that. You can see lots more activity from the trees. The grass seems to just one little soaking is all the grass needs, and we'll see lots of shoots coming up very, very shortly, I would think. Jill, indeed, these animals must be so happy. I think the elephants particularly will be loving this. Nice change from their dusty environment. And this one's decided to get water from all angles, go for a little paddle and enjoy the rain. The canine girl, yay, rain for the animals and nature, absolutely. Sandy Franklin, you asked a question a little while ago about which animal lives the longest in the wild. Now, I know what my initial impressions were, which would be, I know crocodiles get over 100 years, the giant tortoises can get close to 200 years. I know there's a species of whale that can get to sort of 200, the bowhead whale. Um, I know there's a species of shark as well that was very long lived, but I have to say I have just had a little look online for you. Brilliant website for everybody that I've become very accustomed to over the last few weeks is called Live Science. Get lots of interesting new research and information about all things nature on there. And yeah, the shark that I was thinking about, I did discover on here. I think it's the Greenland shark. Let me just find it again. Yeah, Greenland shark, more than 272 years old. Most of these things seem to occur in water, which would make sense. Conditions are more stable, more consistent. You haven't got to worry about musculature so much and the force of gravity pushing down on your body and having to support yourself. But there are some crazy things that I have discovered on here. Tube worms well over 300 years old, and then you get the really crazy stuff, like some corals over 4,000 years old, glass sponges that have been that could well estimated to be up to over 15,000 years old, and then a couple of really weird like jellyfish type things that can regress and turn back from jellyfish back into polyps, so sort of the equivalent of aquatic larvae, if you like. If times get bad, they revert back and then they kind of rebirth themselves as jellyfish and are potentially immortal. So that's pretty amazing to think of. We have an immortal jellyfish down there. Yeah, type of jellyfish. What's it called again? It's just called the immortal jellyfish. That would make sense. Just has Latin names after that. And little small invertebrates known as hydra, which makes sense after the water snake, which can they are made up largely of stem cells which continually regenerate through duplication or cloning, so they don't deteriorate as they get any older. So theoretically, as long as they don't get eaten, they can regenerate indefinitely. But this elephant's having a whale of a time. They do look happy, these animals. I remember seeing lions on a sort of a drizzly morning. You often see the youngsters have loads and loads of energy and they're running around and jumping on each other, just celebrating a little bit of moisture in the air. But yes, Cat Fan is having a great time, and Pangolins Galore also commenting, taking a shower and a bath at the same time. Absolutely. Make use of it while you can. I know elephants often do that to stir up the mud, but you kind of get the impression he's just particularly happy doing it at the moment. Look at this. Like a whale launching into the water. Ah, Fan, you were mentioning those termite mounds. Yes, that's actually where I read that this morning on that Live Science website that some termite mounds in Namaqualand have been dated, thanks to carbon dating, at 34,000 years old. So, how many different colonies have been living in that termite mound? But imagine that termite. People often ask how old are termite mounds, and we flounder around and sort of give some vague estimations. But nice to know some have been aged. But 34,000 years for a termite mound, that's crazy. And Lady Macbeth also mentioning some microbes are immortal. Well, I can certainly believe that. We tend to forget about all those smaller, more microscopic animals, to which, to be honest, most of the species on this planet are made up of those tiny little animals. And we have a tendency to forget about them, but they've got some ridiculous adaptations and ability to survive. So I mentioned those tardigrades earlier that can live for a few hundred years, that can survive temperatures of minus 200 degrees Celsius, plus 150 degrees Celsius. They can handle radiation, complete desiccation, a complete lack of oxygen. There's some very clever things out there. Sheila Patel, it's livescience.com. It's the one that I've been doing a lot of reading on lately. It's just nice to get some latest information on, they break it down into animals and birds and amphibians and arthropods and arachnids, and you can just scroll through some of the latest research that's been documented. Infectious joy, Rosie Adams, you're quite right. It's lovely to see animals rejoicing in this little downpour. I'm glad this has made your day, Cat Fan, but yes, it's lovely to see what can only be described as, just seems a little bit more animated than normal when they do go into the water, like he really is happy with life at the moment. go, yay, we're going to get some new foodstuffs. The grass is going to come. We're going to get fruits, all the fun things that come with summer. Dean, I don't know if animals get tired if the rain continues for days on end. What you normally find is if there is a big storm, a bit like we saw with those impalas. Look at this guy, he's loving life. They'll hide under the trees for a bit, but they can't stay there forever. Mind that tusk in his eyes, dude. So eventually they have to just deal with it and move on and do what needs to be done. But I've seen lions before in really heavy rains. I was working in KZN and we had a rainstorm that just never seemed to end. It was 3 or 4 days long, and these lions just lay under a tree for like 3 days. I think they'd had enough of it. Um, but I guess, yeah, after a while it must get a bit annoying. But they can't just close the curtains and order a takeaway and watch TV until the rain stops. They've still got to live their lives. They've got to get food. So eventually they just have to deal with it. But I think they really enjoy it, especially after winter. So somebody put it rather nicely just now. Canine girl, yeah, living their best life with joy and no judgment. I think that's a nice way of putting it. It's just happy elephants. That's all they are. And they look happier than they did an hour or two ago. Well, shame those illies didn't stick around. You often get the feeling you see some really good interactions. They're not so worried about overheating and they're having a good push and a shove after the rains, but you could definitely see some enjoyment there. I think obviously the rain has abated a little bit. The impalas have ventured out again. Everybody's taking the opportunity to have a little bit of a groom. Looking rather intently towards the other side of the dam, but as you saw, we had a bit of a scan there, and not sure what attracted their attention. Maybe they're wondering where all the elephants have gone. That's the other thing with these sorts of conditions. It's when you rely on smell and hearing a lot. When it is raining, it does make life a little bit more complicated. When there's rain, your other senses are definitely impaired. But good hunting conditions for the predators for the same reasons. Cat fan male and female elephants, youngsters might have a little bit of a push and a shove like that, a little bit of a wrestle, but certainly not to the same level that we would expect to see the bulls do so. And Danny, yeah, it is a form of bonding, exactly that. There's no aggression there, it's play. There'll be some form of hierarchical dominance and sort of, who's who in the zoo going on, but generally speaking, it is just tactile communication and bonding, as you said. Okay, that was really special to share the reins with those elephants enjoying life there in the impalas. I think we're going to head up to Shalati now for a change. Beautiful Shalati sunrise. They've got all these ellies in the river, disappearing in and amongst the reeds there. And the little one crossing over. A couple having a swim as well. And they're beautiful to see elephants crossing rivers. I've only ever seen them once when they hold on to each other's tails. That was out in Tanzania. I saw a herd crossing a river, and they were all formed a line, all holding each other's tails. I always thought that was something you only ever sort of saw in cartoons, but it does happen from time to time. Amazing how these animals just disappear in this tall grass. It's something you need to be very, very aware of if you ever go on a walk and you end up in one of these reed beds. Old buffalo bulls, hippos that are lying outside the water. Amazing how things can disappear in here. Lions as well. I once had to change a tire in a big stand of reeds like this. We had lions on a kill. I think it was a kudu they were eating in there. And on my way out, I ended up with a flat tire. So had to change a tire while surrounded by reeds with zero visibility, safe from the knowledge that there were lions probably only about 30 or 40 meters away from us. Had everybody keeping watch, but I think it might be the fastest I've ever changed a tire with my tracker's help. Nice to see such a big herd. Nice to see such a big group spread out across such a large area. We tend to see them all clustered around the water holes on these cameras, but nice to have a more of a wider angle. These rivers are like veins and arteries of the bush, do attract a lot of animals. When I was in Kruger last week along the Taba River, I went through a stretch where there were so many different mammal species to be seen along there, loads of impalas, there were waterbuck, there were kudus, there were warthogs, there was elephants, there was hippos. Lovely to see so much activity in one place, although I was quite surprised that in other areas of the river, which did have water, we struggled to see anything. They all seem to have congregated along one sort of 5 kilometer stretch of the river, but probably just coincidental. Rosie Adam, yeah, crocs or snakes could be in the reed bed, certainly. I mean, the crocs normally I wouldn't be too concerned about because their first reaction would be to rush into the water. But certainly something to be very mindful of, particularly in drier periods when there isn't so much water around. Crocs do venture out onto land and can migrate between water sources. Snakes, well, there's snakes could theoretically be anywhere, but something I would associate with the water, other than the obvious, like green water snakes and things, would be pythons. Pythons do often hang out in the water. They're quite at home in the water. I remember one time when I was working at a lodge, I can't remember what we were doing, but I think we were possibly looking for frogs, and one of my colleagues trod on something in a shallow area of water and got quite the fright when it turned out to be a very large python that just tried very hard to get out of the way. There was no aggression. But yeah, I mean, you always need to be aware of these things. Situational awareness, something we talk about a lot out in the bush, just being aware that anything could happen at any time and trying to take note of your surroundings and cues from nature. But sometimes things just turn. But I have been walking through a reed bed like this before, and you think everything's fine, and there's just this almighty sort of crashing of noise and reeds moving, and then great big splashes where I disturbed a hippo that was lying up in the reed bed. So you do need to be very careful in those areas. These two young bulls of having a little of extra zest in their scraps this morning. This one at the back looks as if it's drowning. I'm sure it isn't, but nice to see one almost completely submerged. Obviously, a little deep pool there that this one was using, but I think he's also now going to come and join in the fun over here. Jill, hard to say how long elephants will tussle for. Normally, it's not very long, just these little sort of play fights, few minutes perhaps. I think they also, they need to don't want to expend too much energy, particularly on a hot day. So you do tend to get more activity on a cooler day like this, because heat is not such an issue. But generally, they're just little exchanges, a few minutes at a time. But hard to say. I mean, I'm sure some have gone on for longer. But yeah, I would say from the ones that I normally see, it's more of a just a little bit of a push and a shove, and then whatever conclusion is reached, and they carry on as normal. Hilary B, I don't know if Lawrence Anthony is the only human that elephants have ever sort of been recorded mourning. I would imagine that that's not just that one incident. That one's very well documented. But I wouldn't be surprised if it has happened before, but perhaps not quite so well reported on. How they knew that he had passed on, um, I would imagine smell. Elephants have an incredible sense of smell, and they possibly noted or noticed that that smell had depleted over a period of time. That would be my best guess. But again, we'd have to ask the elephants to know for sure. But we certainly do know that elephants seem to have an understanding of death. I actually read a very strange thing a few days ago that had been documented in India, where um, elephant cows had been carrying their calves, deceased calves, or not all of them, but when it had happened, on their tusks on a migration of 2 or 3 days to get away from human habitation and moving into tea plantations, and then physically burying their calves in sort of irrigation channels that had been dug there. And there were photos of this. And it happened 3 or 4 occasions now, um, and they seem to place the deceased elephant upside down on its back with its legs sticking up in the air, and then they were covering it with soil. It was rather weird to see. It's just like these four legs sticking up into the air. Obviously, we have no concept as to why they would be doing that, but that obviously shows there is an appreciation of death, and some sort of desire to, I don't know if protect is the right word, but some of the theories are that it'd be to stop other predators potentially getting to the dead elephant, and the idea that they had travelled for such long distances to get to these particular plantations. Maybe they knew there was a nice sort of trench there. They would remember that there was a hole there that would be the perfect place to put it. And also, it was away from human interaction and human habitation, from a more, again, I don't want to say peaceful necessarily in terms of a spiritual thing, but far less likely to be disturbed by human interaction. But interesting nonetheless to think that they were doing long trips, and it had been recorded 3 or 4 times now in different individuals. Catherine, you're saying that it's been recorded in gorillas, of a concept of people passing away. I could believe that as well, certainly. But I think probably resigned to those animals that have a greater brain capacity, and say more likely to have a feeling of self acknowledgement. What's the word I'm looking for? Self appreciation, appreciation of life and death and their own lives. So a lot of these animals, I'm just thinking outside the box here, are also ones that recognize their reflection in mirrors and things as well. But having that brain capacity to process that information would be very important. Quite a few of you pointing out how much you're enjoying these scenes at Shalati. Cat fan, you had similar scenes when you were staying in a lodge and you missed them, and Canine Girl, you watched elephants at Oliphant's River like this for a long time. It is hypnotic. It's just a really nice way to spend a few hours potentially. Just sit there with your cup of coffee or your tea or whatever it is that you're doing, and just watch life go by. It's very therapeutic. But it's almost end of the show, unfortunately, down to the last minute or so. Thanks everyone for joining us for another live at the Waterhole. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think for me, a couple of highlights. Obviously, the heron catching the frog, that was very, very cool to see. And of course, just seeing some rain down at Tembe and seeing, well, sharing in the delight of particularly that one bull who had a great time bathing and showering at the same time. They're really, really special. And so I hope you have a lovely Sunday and wherever you are, and that you can hang around to join us for the rest of the broadcast for today. But we'll be back again tomorrow, normal time, 12:30 Central African time. One of my colleagues will be taking over, but I'll be back in a couple of days. And I look forward to sharing more of these wonderful, wonderful views with you all. But have a lovely Sunday, or whatever it is you have planned. and we will catch up with you again, same time, same places, tomorrow afternoon.